أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا أشرف الأنبياء المرسلين خاتم النبيين سيد المرسلين أشرف الأنبياء وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وأما بعد فقال الله عز وجل في قرآن المجيد في سورة الرعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغير ما بأنفسهم صدق الله المولان العظيم. My dear respected brothers and sisters and elders in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, blessings and the mercy and compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you all. First, I would like to thank all of you for welcoming me once again to your homes this evening. And I would actually wanted to talk about a matter that has been affecting the Muslim Ummah and the Muslim community, especially in the Western countries like Europe and here in the United States. And in actuality, I believe that its branches have been trickling down throughout the world, across the globe, and especially in the Muslim countries. And this is a phobia that I want to speak about, a fear, a coerced fear, a fear that has been forced down the throat of a good people, of a innocent people, and of a people in general and within the public. And this fear is none other than what's being dubbed in media outlets and in political circles as Islamophobia, or the fear of Islam and or Muslims. In the past decade, since 2001, we have seen a growing concern when it comes to this particular fear of Islam and Muslims, especially in the West. And this fear, in my belief, it's being forced down the throat of people, including Muslims and non-Muslims. And we are finding ourselves, and we're finding Muslim organizations defending Muslims and defending Islam, because in reality this is targeting the very fabric of our faith, the very fabric of our belief, and the very fabric of our existence as Muslims and as a ummah. And as the brothers and sisters who try to defend this, I believe that until we do not effectively and collectively tackle this phobia and this fear, that just like this past decade, we're on a constant defense mode, that if we do not effectively address this, that we might be defending ourselves for decades to come, unless it's not effectively and collectively addressed properly. I want to talk about a very well-known phobia. And in actuality, they're saying that this is one of the biggest fears outside of Islamophobia, of course. There's another fear that existed long before that. And I have to admit that I myself have also taken part as a child within that fear. And that fear is arachnophobia, or the fear of spiders. And today it is known that it's one of the most widespread fears within human beings, the fear of spiders, or arachnophobia. And psychologists and many researchers say that they've been trying to look into what are some of the main elements of a fear of a spider, which 90%, if not more, is harmless, and a very minute number of spiders harm people, and we know that, but yet we still fear spiders. And what these scientists or these researchers or these psychologists are saying, that one of the elements, one of the factors that entail within this phenomenon, within this fear of arachnophobia, is that there's no facial characteristics in a spider, that you cannot define a face of a spider effectively when you look at it. And it's in the fitra of human beings. It's in the nature of human beings that when you cannot identify something, and especially the face of something, you tend to back away from it and fear it. And the powers that play today know this human nature very well, all too well. And in order for many of them to generate massive amounts of funding and money for their corporations, and in order for them to pursue an interest that they may have and an agenda that they may have, they know that one of the most strongest element in order to persuade people to do things that they would not do in any other circumstances, that if a person truly thought about it and contemplated and reflected upon a matter, they would think twice. But when they're in a state of fear and in a state of not being able to recognize the reality of what's being portrayed as their enemy, that you're able to coerce masses into doing almost anything and achieving almost anything you want to achieve through a certain fear. And this fear has been embedded today in our societies throughout the globe, and especially here in the US and in Western countries. Now, I believe that the ultimate phobia today and the ultimate phenomenon today of fears and phobia is beyond arachnophobia, and it's Islamophobia. And I want to relate the ayah that I just recited earlier in the beginning of this program, which you can find in Surah Al-Ra'd in the Quran. And Allah says, Inna Allah, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Inna Allah la yughayru ma biqawmin hatta yughayru ma bi anfusihim. Inna Allah, that verily Allah, la yughayru, that Allah will not change the condition of a qawm, of a people, unless they bring about the change themselves. That Allah's mercy and Allah's nusrat and victory shall always come, shall always be there in time and with patience. But in order to achieve that, a people must work towards it. And I want to relate a story of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, that when he became Khalifa, and you have to know the background, and inshallah we'll speak about this another time. This was a time of great fitna, and there was a lot of trials and tribulations within the ummah when Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, karamallahu wajhuhu, became the Khalifa of Islam. And the first khutbah that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu gave to the Muslims when he became Khalifa, he ascended the pulpit. He ascended the pulpit and he looked upon the Sahaba and he told them something very simple, something very short. He said that this is a time that you need a person of action and not just words. That a person of action and not just words, and I'm here to give you, to act upon it, to make the changes. This was the saying of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu as he ascended the pulpit and gave the khutbah, and that's all he said. That's all Sayyidina Ali said. In Arabic he said rajalu fa'ala, that this is a time for a rajalu fa'ala. And even in Farsi, in Dari, we also say fa'aliyat. It comes from Arabic, meaning to do something, to be active, to make a change. Rajalu fa'ala, that this is a time to do fa'aliyat. And he descends back down and he started to bring about a change, because Muslims were facing a very testing time during the time of Sayyidina Ali. It was a time of fitna, and we'll go into this in a different day, in a different program. And this was after the shahadat of Sayyidina Osman radiallahu anhu, and the Muslims were under a lot of tense pressure. But those were wise words from a very, very wise man. Hazrat Ali karamallahu wajhu was known for his wisdom from a young age. And he could have given an elaborate speech. He could have given a long speech. He had the ability, the intelligence to do so. But it was short and sweet and to the point of what the Muslims need. And I believe that today is a day of fa'ala, that we need rajulu fa'ala, that we need people of activism, that we need people to bring about a change. Now, as the powers at play today are trying their best to tarnish the image of Muslims, and in turn trying their best to tarnish the image of Islam, but inshallah, Allah is the Hafiz and Nasir of this deen, of this book, and inshallah till Yawm al-Qiyamah it's promised. But it's up to us, that the image that they're putting upon us, that we must re-image this, that we must reface it and bring about the true face of Islam, bring about the face of muhabba, the face of compassion, the face of intelligence, the face of understanding, the face of dialogue, the face of cooperation, the face of love, the face of a smile, which Prophet ﷺ says is a charity if a Muslim smiles upon somebody else. And that is, I think, the time that we are here to collectively. It is not the work of a group of people or one person, but as Muslims in general, in your homes, in your neighborhoods, in your communities, in your schools, at work, portray the true image of Islam. Allah says in the Quran that we are khalifas, we are representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His deen in this world. And imagine that. I was talking to a friend who was doing marketing for a company, and he said that they train us when we go to various sites, when we go to various companies, from the handshake to the contact, direct contact in somebody's eyes, to the respect and to knowing certain people's cultures and traditions and respecting that, to that extent, because they have an important interest, and their interest is the bottom line interest of money. However, our interest is way higher, beyond the comprehension of man, beyond the fathom of mankind, that how important the task in front of us and before us is today. And so imagine you being a representative of this deen, of this faith, that in how we should interact with the people we come across every day. I've noticed one thing, that in the recent past, Muslims have somewhat taken a back seat. They've distanced themselves from the general society. And again, in sociology and psychology, when you look into this, this is also a part of nature, of the fitra of human beings, that when you are in a defensive mode, basically, and you are under tense pressure, that you tend to come within your own community, within people that you share similarities with, within people that you share the same ideas with. There's a level of comfort there. And that's why we tend to come this way. And I think that's also important to, and this is what happened during the time of Prophet ﷺ, that when they were in Medina, the Ummah became stronger. The Ummah became more knowledgeable about the traditions of the deen. They understood their faith better. They had a stronger belief system when they were in Medina. And that actually was reflected in the conquest of Mecca and onwards from there on. So I think this that we did for a moment, take the back seat and distance ourselves, was a natural thing to do. But now is a time for us to go into society, for us to take part into society, to show the true image of haqq, to show portray what the reality of this deen is, what the reality of this tradition is, and what the reality of Islam is. We need to start opening up dialogues and understanding with our fellow Americans and Europeans, to allow them to understand about Islam. And not in a way that we're always in a defensive mode, no, through compassion, through love. It was said to Prophet ﷺ that when you're speaking to people about the deen, speak in a very gentle tone, in a very compassionate tone, because you're talking about the mercy of Allah. He was Rahmatul Alameen, a mercy to all mankind, and in order to give them the truth, He had to give them mercy. He had to give them compassion. And I think this is the role that I see ourselves here in America today. And I encourage especially the youth, to go into different fields, to go and tackle different arenas that make up the society as a whole, to go into different knowledges, to go into different teachings and what have you. I'm not talking about faith. I want to relate to you people like who had so much influence on the founding fathers. And again, I will dedicate another program on the founding fathers of America and their influences of Islam, and how much Islam influenced these people. They were influenced by the likes of Ibn Tufayl. They were influenced by the likes of Ibn Khaldun. They were influenced by the likes of Ibn Rushd, or in Latin they call him Averroes, of Ibn Sina, Sheikh Ibn Sina, or as they call him Avicenna in Latin. And the contributions of Al-Khwarizmi, which, and again, Latinized to algorithmi, and we know today as algorithm, which is the very basis of how you're seeing me today in your TVs, that there's algorithms that are used in this camera that is focusing on me right now, and in your computers and your iPhones and your smartphones and your iPads and iPods and what have you. Every single one of these, the very fabric of it and foundation of it is an algorithm, which comes from the name of algorithmi, which is a Latinized version of Al-Khwarizmi. And these people influenced the likes of John Locke, a philosopher, a thinker of his time, which in turn directly influenced the founding fathers of America, of this nation, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington. These people were influenced by Muslims. Thomas Jefferson, who was the author, the key author of the Declarations of Independence, was directly influenced by Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun's books included like Huquq al-Qul or Huquq al-Bayan, the freedom of speech, the freedom of speaking, and what have you. And these are what we find today in the very fabric of this nation, in the Bill of Rights, in the Constitution of America. And who were the people who influenced them? They were Muslims. Before Sheikh Ibn Sina or Averroes, before they studied Plato and Aristotle, before they studied them, they studied the tradition of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They studied the Quran before they became the first doctors, before they became the first astronomers, before they became the first paleontologists, the first scientists that this world has seen, and that in turn they've influenced people after them, that we are seeing the fruits today. They planted those seeds, and we are bearing the fruits today here in the West. Before they studied such people like Plato and Aristotle, they studied the tradition of Prophet ﷺ. They studied the tradition of Muhammad ﷺ, and they made a contribution to society, to people, and what have you. This deen is not made for you to isolate yourself or seclude yourself. Far from it. Far from it. It is totally the opposite of seclusion and the opposite of taking the back seat. I want to relate to you a story of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. During his Khilafah, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, one day he was actually leaning down on the side of the street, and Sayyidina Mughira radiallahu anhu passed by, and he saw that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was showing signs that he was affected by something, that he was saddened about something. And Mughira radiallahu anhu was known for his wisdom, and he was one of the governors that in the Khilafat of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he was the governor of Kufa, present-day Iraq, I believe. And so he was a trusted person, and he was an intelligent person, and he was a general during many of the battles of the Muslims. So Mughira radiallahu anhu looks at Sayyidina Umar Faruq radiallahu anhu and said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what's wrong? What's happening? And Sayyidina Umar Faruq radiallahu anhu says that whenever I come across in picking somebody and appointing somebody to a position like a governorship or a representative in a different nation, I always come across an obstacle. And Sayyidina Mughira radiallahu anhu asked, what's that obstacle? He said, I always come across a man who is very pious, that I have to choose between two people. He is very pious, very devoted, continuously in the masjid, continuously in the worship of Allah. And then I find another Sahaba or Ta'abin that he is also, of course, a pious person, but his piety is not as much as the former. His piety is a little bit less. His he's less pious than the first person, but he is very active. He's engaged. He has a strong intellect and understanding. So I always am in a very difficult position between the two to pick which one. And Sayyidina Mughira radiallahu anhu tells Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, pick the second one, pick the latter. And Umar says, why? He said, because the pious one who is just pious, both of them are pious, but one is more pious than the other, but the second one has a level of activism and engagement, and he has the mentality of making a difference. Sayyidina Mughira says, pick the second one. And Sayyidina Umar says, why? And he says, because the person who is pious, his piety is to him. His piety and his righteousness is to him, between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That second one, his piety is also to him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, his activism and his engagement is reflected on the entire ummah. That the entire ummah, the entire nation, the entire people are affected by his activism and by his intelligence and by the level of compassion and work that person wants to do. He is also pious, and he told Sayyidina Umar al-Faruq to pick the second one. And from that point forward, every time when Sayyidina Umar used to come to this obstacle, he would pick the latter. He would pick the one who is pious and also active. This shows that how important, first, to be close to the tradition of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to hold fast to the deen of Allah, to the book of Allah, but at the same time, not just to sit in the masajids and not be aware of what's happening in your community, not to be aware of what's happening in society, whether it's Muslim or non-Muslim. That if you see injustice or oppression taking place on a non-Muslim, who cares? Help them out. This deen is not just rahmatul lil alameen. That Prophet was a mercy for all mankind, not just for a particular people, not just people. He wasn't rahmatul lil mu'mineen. He wasn't rahmatul lil muslimin, he was rahmatul lil alameen, for every single person out there, and even animals. That even animals bore the mercy and the compassion of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the attributes that we need to reflect in ourselves as a person, as a community, and as a people, in order for us to bring about corrective change, collective change, effective change, to address people, to sit people in dialogue, sit with your neighbors, invite your neighbors over for dinner. Wallahi, I'll tell you that our traditional food goes a long way. Believe me, it goes a long way. If I'm talking to the Afghani brothers, mashallah, the Qabili palau goes a long way. Invite your neighbors over. Sit on a table of understanding. Sit on a table of mutual respect and address them in a peaceful manner and in a very compassionate manner what your fate is, what this deen entails. That what we're seeing on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, which is a totally different world on its own, that's not a reflection of this faith. That's not a reflection of this deen. That Timothy McVeigh, who was the main suspect or the main person who committed the Oklahoma City bombings, is not a reflection of every single Oklahoman and nonetheless every single American or every single Christian, because he was a devout Christian. But he is not a reflection of an entire people or an entire faith. And this is what we need to portray back into society. Get involved. Get involved in the politics of this country or the countries in Europe and wherever you're at. Get involved. Get to know what's on the ballot. It affects you. It affects the future. Know that we care about the future that this country is heading. That we want to take part in the future of this country. That we want to see this country to be salvaged from the turmoil that it's in, because it affects us. It affects us here. It affects us back home. And I will talk about this in another time as well. That we need to become advocates of our people here and our people back home. I actually had met an interior minister of a Muslim country, and he was getting ready to resign. And I met him, and during his resignation, I told him, I said, you're against corruption, and you're trying to make a difference, and I know it was difficult for you to do so. But stick around, because if you leave, you're leaving a power vacuum, and God knows who's going to fill that, and how worse it will get from there on. And he looked at me and said, Mr. Mojadidi, of course he said it in the native language there, he said that I can do more for my country in Washington than I could do here as an interior minister. So I want you to reflect on that an interior minister of a country says, I can do more from a foreign country for my country than here as the interior minister who has the responsibility of everything that happens within that country is reflected on the interior minister. So this goes to show that how much contributions, if we have the right mind frame, if we understand the system, if we get a grasp of how to bring about positive change, that we could make a strong impact in our societies, in our communities, in our nations back home. We can make an impact from here to Afghanistan. We can make an impact from here to our brothers in Iraq, Libya, Egypt, and what have you. And unfortunately, time is of the essence. And we will continue this, and we'll continue various talks and subjects on various matters, inshallah. Again, I wanted to thank you for welcoming me, and may Allah, again, I pray, may Allah bless all of you, may Allah bless your families, may Allah bless your careers, may Allah bless you in the right path, and may Allah always keep us under this umbrella and this ni'amat and this blessing of deen, the tradition of Prophet ﷺ, the tradition of the Sahaba, the tradition of the Mashayikh, and the tradition of